Welcome to Unlayering Together. It sounds much sexier than it actually is, although vulnerability is pretty sexy, I think. In this podcast, we unlayer together what it is to be human and how to make the most of this short, precious experience we call life. Oh my goodness, you are in for a treat today. I am wildly excited to share with you Melissa Tears. I discovered Melissa a few years ago, and I have been learning extraordinary things from her, and she has revolutionized the way that I work, and she has reinforced so many of the things that I already know and totally changed everything at the same time. So Melissa Tears is a multi-award-winning author, lecturer, keynote speaker, and hypnosis trainer. She's the founder of the Center for Integrative Hypnosis, co-founder of the Ethical Coaching Collective, and creator of Coaching the Unconscious Mind. Melissa has earned 3 IMDHA Pen and Quill awards for her books Integrative Hypnosis, A Comprehensive Course in Change, Keeping the Brain in Mind, Practical Neuroscience for Therapists, Coaches, and Hypnosis Practitioners, and Integrative Hypnosis for Kids and Teens, Playing for Change. This woman is extraordinary, and I can't wait for you to hear the juicy yarn that we have about all things, from grief to psychedelics to we cover so much ground, and I am sharing her with you. I know that a lot of my listeners are already therapists and coaches, and everybody needs to know what this woman knows. And so I'm very excited to share her with you and have you have a taste of her wisdom. Enjoy.
So I didn't do any research. I quickly looked, and did you say unlayering?
Unlayering together.
And it started as an unlayering from religion?
It's unlayering everying, anything. Religion is one of my unlayerings, my personal unlayerings. Right. Yeah, but it's unlayering everything. No, it actually started with like a mini series from when my dad died, and just how much I learned through that process. I know you've recently lost your mom, and I'm sorry. It's a big thing.
It's pretty big. It's a daily dealing, you know. Just when I think I've kind of reached this place where we can joke and we can, like look at pictures and videos, all of a sudden it hits me and I'm crying with my daughter on the couch today, is what it is. It comes as it comes. And I find that the best way, and this is not new. This is not a new idea, is to just let it go through you. And sometimes, as you know, because I've been sharing about this on Instagram throughout the process, because it's my way of unlayering, is to get curious and examine what I'm doing inside, right? Rather than feeling that I am just this, no matter what, not just grief, but anything, rather than feeling that I am just kind of a victim of my own thought processes, I always find that curiosity is one of the things that allows me to get out of the muck, right?
Yeah.
A little bit even, because with curiosity, there's something that curiosity moves you forward, right? And I find that if I get curious, what am I saying to myself right now that has me feeling this? What images am I looking at in my mind's eye that I'm unaware of until I shine a light on it? And so by getting curious, by tracking my own internal processing through this grief process, I really learn a lot. And as I'm learning and sharing, I've heard from so many people that it's helped them. And so I just took everyone along for the journey. As you know, I had a free a couple of free workshops. The
Yeah.
first was caregivers, because I was my mother's caregiver and didn't realize how hard it was until I was in it. And then
I understand that too.
the
Yeah.
free class on grief. And I do that because in posting about grief and what I'm discovering about my own internal processing and how the language we use is very telling on what, not only what emotional state we're speaking out of,
Mm.
but what emotional state can be used as a stepping stone out of it. In other
Yeah.
words, I found that the way that I was talking to myself in my mind had a direct and immediate impact on the level of pain,
Yeah.
and had a direct impact on the part of me that was feeling the pain.
Yeah.
So it was a real interesting discovery when I found myself, thinking in terms of mommy versus mom versus Joan.
Mm.
I would always call her Joan. Hey, where's Joni?
Yeah.
Like, because I've got siblings in my building, and it was always like, who's got eyes on the old lady? You
Right.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it was, the last year and a half of her life, I had bought her an apartment right up the hall from me.
Mhm.
And, she started her day with a cappuccino like every morning, and then would, have lunch and dinner with us. And, you know, um, knowing how we speak to ourselves, what terminology, I was really dealing with, almost like a parts integration process at one point,
Yeah.
when I recognized that there was that little girl in me that was like, oh my God, my mom, my
Mhm.
mommy, and
Mm.
then, the older version of me, and then the slightly dissociated part of me, right? That would
Yeah.
be like Joan, and how many different perspectives we can take on one burning, you know, um, burning hole of pain.
Yeah.
you know,
Yep. Yeah.
Sometimes you drop right in it, and from in it you discover things. Sometimes you get curious and step out of it and look at it. And in my training that you're going to take, um, I talk about how to use language to help our clients. I
Mhm.
talk about the things that we say every day and don't ever actually look close enough to understand what the language does to consciousness. So part of the coaching the unconscious mind course is getting getting more aware, cognizant, but also getting flexible in how we use language. In other words, if if a client comes to me and says, I just I'm overwhelmed. I listen to them. I listen to the unconscious mind, which tends to be literal on many levels in
Mhm.
when it comes to speaking. Language can be looked at in a very concrete way. So if somebody says, I'm overwhelmed, I imagine they're processing the problem as being up here.
Yep.
Oh, so one
Mhm.
way to help them to shift is to say, well, above all that, what's important to
Mm.
you about our work together? Or above and beyond that, how do you see yourself
That's great.
once you've, right?
Mm.
If somebody says, I can't get through this, and you look at their gestures and their hands are subtly making, this
Yeah.
movement is something is stuck in front of them. And once you start to know this, you'll see it,
Mm.
hear it, and see it. If they say, I just, I'm not going to make it through, I can't get through this. So I imagine it's right in front of them, and I can say, well, aside from that, what's important to you
Mhm.
now? Or apart from that, or taking a step back from that, taking a deep breath in.
Mm.
Let's find a different direction, right?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
aside from that,
much
apart from that,
nuance.
beyond
Yeah.
that, I was just telling somebody that I have a supervision for all of my students
Mhm.
every other Wednesday. Basically, anyone who's gone through my certification training for the past 25 years is welcome to it. I've been doing this for that long. And it's every other Wednesday, and whoever's around logs on now. It used to be actually at my center here in Chelsea in Manhattan.
Mhm.
Um, and then, COVID was a curse and a blessing as far as my business goes, because now, people can join from everywhere.
Yeah.
Because I've
Hello
always
from
traveled.
Sydney this morning.
Exactly. I've
Yeah.
always traveled to train people. I've traveled to Adelaide. I had
Yeah.
60 doctors, in Adelaide,
Mhm.
maybe in, I want to say 2018. I could be wrong, 2017.
Mhm.
Anyway, might be going back there next year, actually.
Oh,
The
please
deal,
come.
if one of the doctors can get their hands on an fMRI machine so I could look into people's brains,
Oh my
then I'm going.
God,
So
I wanna
you do that
play.
for me, and I will travel across the globe for you. So we're working on it. But one of the things that somebody said in supervision Wednesday night, when I tried to help them, and they immediately went into, when I think about this, and I said, no, 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 no. Thinking about this, where are you?
Mm.
And then I said to the class, take a guess. If someone is talking about something, they're not in it.
In it,
And in
yeah.
order to access the neural network of the problem, in order to actually rewire the brain, we've got to light it up. And you can't do that from a dissociated position. So anyway, but that hint of just saying about
About.
is
Yeah.
an indication where consciousness is. So back to what we're learning about ourselves, and grief and unlayering, as you call it, that it's been a big lesson for me, because I noticed that curiosity, while always being on some level my go-to position, right? Which is why I'm still doing the same thing, still in this mind field,
Mhm.
because there's never any point at which I will stop learning, because there's no cap on this. We still don't know so much.
Yeah.
So always expanding. And so curiosity has kept me in this game, but it's also one of the things that I think makes me a good practitioner, because
Yeah.
I am very curious. But through this grief, I discovered that curiosity is also my defense mechanism. It
How
is,
so? What?
it is literally a defensive move for me. You know,
Yeah.
like when you think about, and the reason why I love curiosity, and I will get my clients curious over almost any other emotion, almost any other state of mind, because if I can get my clients curious about how they're doing what they're doing inside their mind, well, then half the work is done,
Mm.
because you see, just leaned in.
Mm.
That's what I'm looking for.
Mm.
Curiosity has dopamine, which means they're going to remember things easier. They're going to learn more quickly. Curiosity, right? When you're curious, you know what can't be riding along curiosity? Fear,
Mm.
anxiety,
Mm.
anger, even. I always joke when I'm talking about this. My father would say things like, I'm curious how you think you can waltz in here at 1 a.m, like when I
Yeah.
was a kid. And I would say, you know what? He's not really
Yeah, I
curious.
don't think that's true, Dad. No.
That's not curiosity. So, but real curiosity has us leaning in.
Mm.
With
Yeah.
fear and things like that, they naturally, consciousness wants to move back.
Yeah.
So
I'm
anyway,
feeling confronted by your uh because curiosity for me is absolutely everything. Uh but the curiosity as a defense mechanism, I'm just tweaking that in myself. Just as you're saying it, I'm like, whoa, yeah, that
and
happens. That
and
happens.
I was gonna say it isn't everybody. It's just something I discovered in myself.
Mm.
So no need to feel confronted, but maybe invited to explore it a little bit, because
I don't think it's bad, but it's just that
oh,
I've just not seen that. And it's true in
I
me as
hadn't
well.
either. That's why I
It's
brought
true
it up.
in me. Yeah.
I hadn't either, but just watching myself watch myself.
Mhm. Yeah.
With 2 layers of dissociation there. Watching myself watch myself, it started to, dawn on me that Curiosity is all the things I've always thought of and more.
Mm. How did you find that? Like, for me, finding curiosity was because I grew up so religiously, and it was absolute. Yeah, it was certainty.
Ah,
And so I
right.
come from this black and white certainty. And so breaking out of that to find curiosity. And so curiosity is my core value in everything. And to find safety in curiosity.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. After
That's it.
being so rigid in my view. And so that was my process, kind of coming from that, and then the liberation of curiosity over
Right, wow,
certainty.
and that's a big jump to be
Yeah.
comfortable inside of that curiosity. I mean, I just last week or this week, I don't know, time is funny, posted, an old idea of mine, which is, that most of our job is getting people comfortable, befriending uncertainty, you
Mm.
know, comfortable and with uncertainty because we live in an uncertain world and the brain hates uncertainty. It will make up any old crazy narrative as long as it feels better than uncertainty. I grew up very differently.
Mhm.
I grew up, my mother was Jewish, my father raised Catholic. By the time they had us, they were both atheists. They just
Okay.
didn't.
Yeah.
So they weren't, we weren't steered in any direction. And basically it was, we don't know, figure it out yourself. And so I I was a seeker,
Yeah. You had no choice but to be curious.
I mean, exactly.
Yeah.
So I, at a very young age, no matter what best friend I had at the time,
Mhm.
I would attend their church or their
Mm.
synagogue or their, and so by the time I was like 13, I had been so many things. I was Catholic for a while because I really love the candles and the
Mm.
majesty of it and the ritual. It was very pagan to me, it was
Mhm. And it is, right?
I really liked Catholicism. They didn't take kindly to me going up and taking, the cracker, the wafer, because I think you had to go through a few things, like your first Holy Communion or whatever.
Oh,
And I
okay.
didn't
You
take
skipped a
any
few
of that.
steps.
I skipped a few steps. Welcome to my world. I do that. I still um but I was a Methodist for a while. I was a Baptist for a little while. Um, I went to a synagogue just a couple of times. I found it boring. So I was, by the time I was 13, I was like one of the most annoying atheists. That's when I was busy like tripping and doing psychedelics and and
Yeah.
just looking at everybody like whatever crutch you need,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
so I was the obnoxious kind at 13, 14, 15, 16, and then I had a mushroom trip at 17 which cracked that and turned
Right.
me into agnostic
Mhm.
because I had this
Realization of.
almost a spiritual
Mhm.
experience of the interconnectedness
Mm.
of nature, and I sometimes use that
Mushrooms will do
moment.
that.
Mushrooms will do that. When I'm on podcasts or interviews and they're like, "What's your origin story?" Like I can start from many places, but really I think the biggest one was a mushroom trip where I had that knowing
Mm.
and then spent the rest of my life trying to get it back.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what did I know in that moment that made sense, that made everything make sense. And I understood my place in the universe. I
Mm.
understood everything, but then it was gone,
Mm.
which is how I got into doing what I do,
Yeah.
right? Because I was
Except that it's
exploring.
not gone, right?
Well,
The feeling of it, but the knowing of it doesn't.
I would say that it was gone for a long time for me, only
Mhm.
because it was so crystal clear.
Mm.
And what I was looking for was the clarity of understanding that I had in that moment.
Mm.
Um, I don't, what's not gone is the knowing that
Yeah.
I had that experience. So, dabbling in every psychedelic I could get my brain on, and until I realized that, once I started to figure out how is this working in the brain, and I started to dive deeper into understanding how drugs work. And
Yeah.
then, oh, well, that means we have a receptor for it. We must make some natural, you know,
And you've been
some
playing in that space?
chemical that is similar to
Mm,
hallucinogenics. And so then I started going like to the Monroe Institute and dabbling in all of these different things to try and get the experience without the drugs.
mm,
And that's when I discovered hypnosis, right? It was just another way of altering my state of consciousness
yeah.
to try and push the boundaries, push the limits, and to just, inquiry. I never thought I would do it for a living. I was a rock and roll musician, you know what I mean? It was like it was my hobby. I was the weird person in the back of the club, like hypnotizing people.
Yeah.
Um,
I've got this new trick. Let's play.
yeah, out of
Mm,
fascination.
mm,
So
yeah.
we've gone in a few different directions. Oh, curiosity. I was like, what? How did I
How
end
did we
up
get here? Yeah.
religion? And because of the natural seeking,
Yeah.
I've always been seeking because that was one driving force, curiosity. The other driving force, um, growing up, was my fear of death. And I had a very healthy fear of death since I was about 3 or 4,
Mm,
and and had an awareness of death.
mm,
I used to have very high fevers and would hallucinate,
right.
and so I would be terrorized, and, so part of my searching was always, with religion, was show me.
Yeah.
Prove to me that there's something beyond this. Prove to me that death isn't just the end of everything and we just get eaten by worms. Prove to me. As a matter of fact, I used to sit there challenging God all the time. I would stare at a pencil and be thinking, if you exist, move it. And, my mother used to walk by me and be like, oh, challenging God again, like I would just be staring at something and she would know that I was waiting for God to show me something.
Mm,
So,
mm,
that's why the Monroe Institute, because it was an interesting way of synchronizing my brain waves and learning how to consciously shift into slower brain waves or faster brain waves. And
yeah.
really, people were going out of their body. And I thought if I could have an experience like that, it's one step closer to believing something.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
fear of death was a healthy driver as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that interesting coming from opposite ends? You were looking for something to believe in, and I had to unbelieve in
I
everything.
know. That's why I brought it up
It's
because,
fantastic.
and yet here we are. We've
I
met in
know.
the middle
In
here.
with so much sameness. So much sameness. So
Exactly.
I I want to talk about um and you talk about this all the time in that there's so many ways to do the work that we do,
Yeah.
and that it's all interconnected and there's no one way. And so I learned many modalities, and a core modality. I started with rapid transformational therapy, and which is Marissa Peer,
Right. Okay.
and it's a hypnosis based
I know.
modality. Yeah. And I've done others since then, but you introduced me to the meta pattern. So I had very successfully nailed several different modalities, and they were incredible in the results that they offered. However,
Sure.
however, your introduction to the meta pattern sent me on this wild deep dive of
Good.
illumination, and and then memory consolidation and all these things, and then to see where it is in everything, in
That's right. So once you
every as
realize that what you thought was all these separate
you
modalities,
go,
underlying mechanism, what's happening in the brain is the same,
yeah,
provided certain key things, because there's people that can mess that up by not actually lighting up the relevant neural network, so they're
yeah,
not actually connecting the change to where it needs to be, and that's
yeah.
where these modalities don't work,
Well,
right? In this,
that's when it made sense to me as to where
right,
why it doesn't when it doesn't. Yeah, and why
right.
it does when it does, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been talking about this a lot, as a matter of fact, I think the last 2 keynote speeches I did
Mm.
were all about this, and were you at the Hypno Thoughts Live in Vegas? No.
No,
No,
no.
it's a far, it's a
It's a
big,
trip.
big trip. Only because I took it, kind of public in
Mhm.
that I've been saying it for quite a few years, and I did a keynote speech or two on it. I called the talk that I did "Theory of Everything," you know,
Yeah,
change work-wise,
yeah.
and that's why I introduced this. Look, we're all right, right?
Mm.
It's we all have a piece of the elephant and we got to stop arguing over what an elephant is like,
Right?
right? Because we're all holding a piece of it. And so I started to bring it together and say, look, if you look at this in terms of an outgrowthing of how neurons expand territory, and you understand that we start with very early sensory experience as a newborn, and that becomes the scaffolding with which we then build more and more life experience, and we go from that early sensory experience out into the level of abstraction.
Mhm.
And so you understand that if you've got a neural network of, let's say, problem, and this problem includes, the early attachment
Mhm.
style of the child, which then will, indicate how they're going to respond when separated from their parent, how they're going to respond when they go to kindergarten, how they're going to respond to, authority, and how they're then going to start forming their beliefs about themselves, about the world, about
Mhm.
safety and not safety. That's going to then lead into the actions, what they do and don't do, right?
Yep.
According to their beliefs and expectations. And that then is going to become foundational in what becomes their personality through
Mm.
life, right?
Mhm.
Your brain takes the shape of what you repeatedly do
Mm.
and what you repeatedly think and feel. And so once you understand that by lighting up the problem in the right way, right, associating it to the problem, you're actually lighting up the whole neural schema.
Mm.
So that when people argue, oh,
Yeah.
you've got to get to the core beliefs,
Yeah.
or you've got to get to the cognitive dissonance, or you've got to get to the initial sensitizing event and then the subsequent sensitizing events, or you need to get to the core beliefs or the somatic experiencing, or they don't understand it's all a part of the network,
Mm.
right? That when we do therapeutic memory reconsolidation on a memory, right, a traumatic memory,
Mhm.
that trickles down through the whole neural schema into the very early emotional learnings.
Yeah.
It's how it can work.
And
And so,
it's so
yeah, once you
easy
get
and
that, it
fast.
becomes easier.
Mm.
And so when people look, I've trained therapists for 25 years, right?
Yeah.
I've come up against all the real, the dogma.
Mm.
And
Well,
one of
you
my
train psychiatrists, right?
Yeah, as
Mm.
well. And one of my favorite quotes by Milton Erickson is, "A therapist can't afford the luxury of a theory,
Mm. Yep.
because as soon as they do, they're filtering out information that could be vital, but it doesn't, conform to their therapeutic modality. They literally will not see it.
Yeah.
And their theory becomes the cognitive filter inside of them with which they start to see the work.
Mm.
And they have to fit everyone into that, right? So as with the modalities that you've learned, you're shaping experience by putting them into this one thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and that becomes problematic because not everyone can go like that into those places and spaces and, you know, unconscious phases, really.
Mm.
So,
Not to
once
mention it gets boring year
I
after
know
year
it
after
takes
year.
takes the art the
It,
art out of the change work dance. It should be a dance.
mm.
And you're only half of the
Yeah.
couple. And that's the thing, right? Things like that, those modalities that are like, just close your eyes and let me walk you through this same old process. As soon as you're bored, the client gets bored. We are transmitting millions of bits of
Mm.
information between us, you, and your client. And when you're bored, they feel it
Yeah.
and they get bored. Your expectation, your belief will start to filter what happens, right? And so for me to take the dance out of it, to assume control uh in a space where you are so much better off getting the organic solutions
Hmm.
from the client,
Yeah.
their language, their metaphors, their beliefs and their expectations, right? And not
Absolutely.
And that was my I mean, look, I was trained in very traditional hypnosis first, very
Hmm.
authoritative, right?
Hmm.
Take a deep breath in, close your eyes, and now I'm going to go on and build these very elaborate trances,
Hmm.
right? With the client passively listening. But I got tired of that pretty quickly
Yeah.
when, I started challenging every assumption that was inherent in the modality.
Mm.
And then you start poking at it a little bit, and a
Yep.
bunch fall apart, and you're like, oh, I guess I didn't need to do this. Oh, I guess that doesn't always hold true. Oh, where is the research on that? And I started to become one of those students,
Hmm.
right? They would say this blanket thing with conviction, and I would say, can you point me to the research on this? Because I've heard this now 3 times, and yet, to the best of my knowledge, Stanford and a few other places absolutely negate what you're saying
Hmm.
in the research that comes out. I would love for what you're saying to be true because it's easy and we like it. It's a good metaphor. And they're just they can't, because they're just repeating what their teacher told them, who's repeating what their teacher told them, and nobody fucking questions anything. And so that was my job as a student of this work
Yeah.
for 20 years, and once you start to realize that, it becomes far more um engaging for both
Hmm.
you and your client when it is a cooperative unlayering, to
Yeah.
use your,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Absolutely.
cooperative. And
Yeah.
so, that's the kind of work that I like. And don't get me wrong, I still do very deep trance stuff. It's just it's informed by the client.
Yes. And we're not saying, just to clarify, that any modality can't work and doesn't work. They're,
No, most of them follow the essential
yeah.
pieces of
Yeah.
how the brain changes.
Yeah.
But in my experience, 98% of all of the colleagues that I know
Mm.
don't understand the underlying pattern
Mm.
underneath what they're doing. Now, I used to teach NLP. I was still using all these NLP patterns, very early on, without recognizing that there was a pattern,
Mhm.
which all of these, were examples of. The
And
swish pattern, re-imprinting, timeline therapy, regression to cause,
mhm.
Marissa Peer's thing. It's
Yeah,
all the same thing.
it
And so
absolutely
it can
is.
all work.
And once you know it, like, for me now, the difference, and I can't wait to dive deeper into your work, but from what I've already learned from you is it has changed what I do so much. It's now like it's play. Like
Yes.
it's just play. It's just like, I had a guy just the other day and he's like chronic OCD and it's like this whole, and I sat just looking at him for a minute thinking, uh, who knows what's going to happen here? Like I had no, so we just started to play and we just, and it just was this beautiful, and we end up hysterical in fits of laughter and, as you move to, and I love the magic of the play. Like it's just so much
Yeah.
more fun now. All of it. For
Yeah.
me and my clients.
Well, my last book that I wrote with the wonderful Kelly Woods, God, I
Mhm.
love that lady. was actually called, right? It was Integrative Hypnosis for Kids and Teens,
Mm.
Playing for Change
Yeah.
was the
Great
title.
book.
So, so we are, play is very much a big part of this. And look, it's not to say that I don't work with serious stuff. I work in conjunction with a lot of psychiatrists. So I have a broad range
Mm.
of, serious OCD and trauma and all of
Mm.
that. And
Mm.
it's not that I don't take the serious stuff seriously, but
No.
once you understand the mechanism with which even those which seem so stuck can change,
Mm.
because a lot of my work is based on some of the work of Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz, who
Mhm.
worked with OCD and looked at how the brain can change more rapidly than anyone ever expected,
Yeah.
right? And so I kind of developed things based on the work of the work being done with very serious topics,
Mm.
trauma and things like that. But I have found that the biggest obstacle for me over all these years in training therapists and psychiatrists was getting over the objection to how fast or how simple it
Mm.
was. And it was like I have learned to not try and convince them, to train them and simply invite them to be curious long enough, right, to learn something new
Mhm.
and to test it. I always say, look, don't believe me.
Mm.
I'm going to show you demos. I'm going to show you the work. You'll see the results. We'll check back in 6 months. You'll see that these results done in one little session here in front of the group has long stand. As a matter of fact, it's funny because we
You
taught
do it
here
in
at
15 minutes. Like, and
I know.
you're already done in your session, Sorry,
I
keep going.
know. And sometimes I would elongate it just for the benefit of the therapist,
Mhm.
but I
Mhm.
know it was already done. I
Mm.
just add some bells and whistles so it looks a bit more complex. But I was just speaking of Australia. The person who brings me in, he's a doctor in Adelaide. He flew to an NGH conference many years ago,
Mhm.
and he had severe dental phobia, and I had forgotten.
Mhm.
But anyway, he brought it up in one of my posts.
And
Uh,
NGH being National Guild of
yeah,
Hypnotists.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't.
Australians wouldn't know.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I don't teach that one anymore.
Yeah.
Not for years, um, but I brought him up as
Mhm.
a demo subject for this kind of work. It was a 2-day pre-conference. And on, coaching the unconscious mind, I was
Mhm.
teaching the pattern, and it was on his severe dental phobia. And he goes back to Australia and gets all this dental work done. So that is why he brought me in
It's like,
to
yeah.
train a bunch of his colleagues,
Mhm.
because he couldn't believe it.
Mm.
And so for me, I always want them to try it for themselves. I say, look, my job is to get you really skilled so that you can do this work and you can do it fast.
Mm.
I'm not going to sit here trying to convince you. I'm just going to show you time and time again how it works, and then force you to go into breakout rooms, and you'll figure it out, and you'll find out how good it works by
Yeah.
the result you get. And the work speaks for itself. And so I have stopped trying to convince anybody. I'm like, here's the thing, prove me
Try it.
wrong.
Yeah.
That's right. I'm like, prove me wrong,
Mm.
please, because that means that my student will go out and try their damnedest
Mm.
to, and they'll
Mhm.
keep doing the work, and they'll keep doing the work. And that's when they'll get good at it, you know?
It's awesome. Can you tell me your doctor's name?
Yeah, it's Michael Goldblatt. And
Michael
he,
Goldblatt.
Blatt, Blatt.
Mhm.
And, I can't promise anything yet, but we're talking about maybe February in Adelaide.
Okay.
I like Adelaide. It's a little beach town. It feels like a
It's
little beach
cruisy.
town.
It's
Do you say
chill.
cruisy?
Yeah,
Chill.
it's
Yes.
yeah, yeah. It's gentle.
Here in New York, cruisy means something else.
Oh, does it?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, that's
chill.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know a lot of people are like, why the hell are you going to Adelaide? Why not come to Sydney? And I'm like, well, that's the person who's bringing me in.
Yeah.
They're in Adelaide. That's where I taught. But then I went to Melbourne for a while and really hung out there with some cool people. You got some really good NLP trainers and change workers there.
Hmm. So I haven't even asked you any of my questions. Um, how do you think that, and I'm just going to call it mainstream, right? How do you think that mainstream opinion, ideas, processes, like how that sits right now, how do you think that's messing with mental health?
Just a little question. Where do I start there? I would say this: not understanding what's happening in the brain
Hmm.
and how what happens when you focus attention on problem versus solution, and how you're strengthening the neural networks of a problem by having people repeat the story over and over and dig deeper into the negative shit over and over again for years and years is the neuroscience speaks for itself, and to me, um my daughter is in graduate school for a mental health counseling degree,
Hmm.
and some of her classes, she was doing virtually, and sometimes she'd be at my apartment and I would listen, and I couldn't freaking believe that they're still talking about Freud, they're still talking about, it's like, what? Or it's just very surface structure, right? There's the flavor of the day, CBT.
Hmm.
But CBT can be fantastic for people. But if you understand what's going on in the brain and how the brain changes, then you can use the CBT techniques to actually change the brain. But they don't. They don't necessarily explore that.
Mm.
It becomes symptom management. And so they don't have an understanding of therapeutic memory reconsolidation. They don't have an understanding of how consciousness shapes the brain. And to me, that's where the trouble really comes in. That, and not understanding some of the research on, giving people time to process and debrief before asking questions about a traumatic moment. They
Hmm.
found that if someone, like, they discovered this unfortunately after the World Trade Center here, where they had a bunch of therapists come onto the scene, the people that talked
Immediately. Mm.
immediately,
Mm.
thinking, I mean, right, common
Mm.
sense would say that's the right thing to do, help people to process
Support.
what they've
Yeah.
been through. Unfortunately, in the long-term study, they found that those people suffered from more post-traumatic stress disorder than the people that didn't stop to talk to the therapist.
Hmm.
Because, you know what I mean? Like animals, we shake shit off
Yeah.
in our own way. Maybe not as, drastic,
But that's good.
but
Yeah.
the brain has amazing mechanisms to balance itself, to
Mm.
get back into a balanced state of mind and body. And what happens is, what I think it really stems from not understanding the nature of being on many levels, which is, we are constantly in flow. My friend John Overdurf, he always says, all we are is changing.
Mm.
Right? It used to be his, like, bumper sticker was, all we are is change. But
Yeah.
then he realized that that too was a nominalization. And a nominalization, for your listeners, is just a big word to describe something that used to be a verb and has been nouned. It used to be a process and has been frozen.
Ah,
And
yeah.
so one of the biggest nominalizations that we deal with on a daily basis is me, as if I'm a stuck thing, as if
A
I'm
one
not a,
thing.
right, as if
Mm.
I'm a noun,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
Taught person, place, or thing. What's a noun? But once you discover that, so John changed it from all we are is change to
To
all we are is
changing.
changing,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And when I go into this kind of rap of how nothing stays the same and how we are an ever changing, even now, flow of energy.
Mm.
What happens is we take time and we freeze it. We freeze a moment. And instead of moving through things, we freeze usually a negative moment, a traumatic moment, and it just becomes a GIF or a GIF, however you want to pronounce
Yeah.
it. Um, and then we call it a problem. But if we understood that we're just flowing through time and we can move through it,
Mm.
it becomes very different. So the problem with a lot of mainstream modalities is that they don't understand the fluid nature of consciousness, the fluid nature of even your body. You
Mm.
know, billions of cells have died and billions of cells have been born since since you asked that question,
Mm. Mm.
right? That in 1 year, it's said that over 95% of every subatomic particle that makes up every cell in your body will be different. In
Mm.
7 years, it's an entire turnaround. Not a
Yep.
single subatomic particle, not a single cell will be the same in 7 years. And yet we think that we are this stuck thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is really at the root of so many of these problems. And I feel like I'd rather talk about what's positive, which is therapeutic memory reconsolidation is getting more and more is making its way into therapy rooms.
Mm.
Is used to be the common accepted duration for things to go from the laboratory, from the research to the practical therapy room, right? Would be
Yeah.
like 50 years. Well, now with the internet, we don't have to wait so long.
And everybody just grab it. Grab what they want.
That's right. And so I think, that is when things are going to shift and change. When the barrier between embodied, cognition, neuroscience, priming, when all these boundaries start to get knocked down and you
Mm.
have you know, a more renaissance way of looking at the holistic nature of change
Mhm.
on every level,
Mm.
physically, emotionally, mentally, psychologically, it's all a flow. And nothing is in a vacuum, and we're still compartmentalizing things as if there were these barriers, these walls to us, right?
Yeah.
Like here's
Yeah.
the body, here is the mind, here is the emotions, here is the logic, here is this, your right brain, no, your left brain. What bullshit,
Mm.
right? We are
Yeah.
all these things at once. And so to kind of shine a light on the more holistic nature of being and consciousness, I think that's when mainstream is gonna um, widen out a little bit. That
Mm.
stream's gonna widen out into a river,
Mhm.
and then we can kind of flow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You may have, yeah, you've probably touched on this already. What is the one big thing that you wish everybody knew?
I mean, in mental health, you mean?
In where
You're like,
y
I'm like,
and
that's a big
that's a really
question.
big question, but so it can be in mental health, but I mean, if you just think about just individuals, just humanity, people, what is it from you
Oh my, well, I
that
mean, it's gonna sound a little Californian and a little spiritual at this point, but you know that we are all interconnected,
mm,
and I don't even mean this in a spiritual sense, although many people would say yes, yes to that being one of their truths. I mean on a quantum level. And I don't mean quantum the way that a lot of new age people throw around the word, which I
mm,
find a little annoying. I mean, if you really look at it, if you really look at the implications of what non local experimentation shows us, of what even the Big Bang shows us, that
mhm,
we all were once kind of connected, you know?
yeah,
But also just that the interconnected nature of our experience with this planet, with the air we breathe, with, with the water, right? So one of the things that I find fascinating is and I think this was in Australia, now that I think about it. There's like a 3-minute video I want your listeners to look up,
Hmm.
called Where Do Trees Get Their Mass?
Maybe I'll link it in the show
And it's this
notes.
funny little video, and I won't do any spoiler alerts, but
Yeah.
I watched that video, and maybe it was a DMT trip that I had where I really started to understand the interconnected nature again of our place with the earth and the trees, and how some of the research on grounding. Now I'm really going to sound new age, but you know um one of my ways of avoiding jet lag, because I travel a
Hmm.
lot, is to put my bare feet on the ground of wherever I travel to, and understanding that there is a resonance there, and it's not just pseudoscience. You can
Mm.
measure it. You
Yeah.
can measure that frequency, that and once you kind of acclimate to, and you'll acclimate to the time zone so much faster
Mm.
if you just take your shoes off and put your bare feet on the grass, on the
Hmm.
earth.
Hmm.
um when you start to look at how we have separated ourselves from nature, from our individual communities, from our species,
Mm.
from our interspecies community,
Yeah.
how we separate ourselves from animals as if we're not an animal,
Yeah.
how we separate ourselves from every aspect of nature.
Yeah.
You start to realize that that has done so much damage to us physically, that the inflammation in our bodies, the food that we eat, it's like every aspect of our physical and mental health, because again, you can't separate them. Right now, this microbiome medicine that everyone is onto now is
Mm.
showing you just how you can't separate the mind and the body, how
Mm.
the gut, and the fact that we are we are only 10% human, and that every other aspect of who we are is not human. Every other cell in our body is not human.
Yeah.
It's bacteria, it's all these other things. There's a great book by that title. That's why I said it that way.
What's
10%.
10%
Yeah.
human?
Yeah. I go down rabbit holes of research. And for a while,
I love it.
I was very much into parasitic manipulation and the brain on
Oh, okay.
parasites. Led me into the microbiome, which led me into toxoplasmosis and all of this stuff, and how our gut influences our mind, our
Yeah.
mood, our hormonal balance, everything. And so when you realize that that is true of nature, and that part of what has upset our microbiome is separating ourselves from nature by eating so much processed food, and you know what I mean, like
Yeah.
taking all of we live in a symbiotic ecosystem,
Yeah. And
right?
we've gone with the binary and the separation of all things.
That's right.
Yeah.
And everything from from how just every aspect of life. And
Mm.
so anyway, so if there was one thing, to
Mhm.
answer
Mhm.
your question,
Yeah.
it would be to really understand. I think if we truly understood the interconnected nature of life,
Yeah.
that on like a visceral level, that we couldn't hurt each other anymore, because we would see that we're hurting a part of ourselves, and that we're
Mm.
connected there. And I told you that was going to sound really un-New York of me, but it's kind of what I've been discovering,
Lucky.
reluctantly. But I go for my walks in the park every day, and boy, when I don't, I notice it.
Mm. Mm.
It's just a part of my morning kind of ritual. As you know, I'm a big, research junkie. I know to get the earliest sunshine directly into my eyes to
Mm.
jumpstart the neurochemistry
Mhm.
and, and their circadian system. I know you know, to do those things.
Yeah.
That's what influences me the most is research. But um, it's funny how going so far into the science, you come out on the other side very butting up against the mystics, and in my
Don't you love that it just proves
I
ever more there's no separation?
that's right. And in one of my books, Keeping the Brain in Mind, I say, I quote the I forget who said it. Sorry, I'm blanking on it. That said, the scientists climbed the mountain and found the mystics waiting for them.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
And I love that, and that's kind of where I'm at. I just closed on a big farm upstate New York where
So exciting.
it's going to be an animal sanctuary and a big, compound for my family. And I might do some live trainings there just because it'll be fun to have. It's an old bed and breakfast, so there's like 7 bedrooms, and it's pretty cool. And I thought, how
Awesome.
cool for like a small little master class where we can have a sleepover and I can
Mm.
cook for people. That would be fun. So that'll be in the works some point soon.
Magical.
Yeah.
Tell us about your upcoming training.
So I have two, and one is a prerequisite for the other.
Mhm.
I've just decided to do it that way because it makes more sense. Um, it's coaching the unconscious mind,
Mhm.
and it's my kind of system of change work, where it kind of incorporates a lot of what we've been talking about, and in a very easy to use, and then easy to adapt, and then easy to make your own system of
Mhm.
change that
Do
covers a few different levels.
do people have to be therapists already to take that course?
Um,
Anyone can take your Yeah.
anyone can take that class, and
Mhm.
then that is for the month of September, and it's pretty big intensive.
Mhm.
But I teach people from all over the world so
Mhm.
that I have a bunch of practice sessions, extra practice sessions throughout the week for every time zone,
Mhm.
because I want people to kind of really embody the skill set.
Yeah.
And sometimes the time of the training doesn't work out for people, and so they have to miss some hours or whatever, and I give them a place to make it up. So that is a September intensive. But as I mentioned earlier, my students are my students if I have my way for life,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So that every other Wednesday we meet again,
Yeah.
and I have supervision and practice. I don't charge extra for that. I always want a place for my students to be able to land, to be able to get feedback, to be able to ask questions, and just to have the support that I wish I had had when I first started. So
Yeah.
I am perpetually teaching a course I wish I had had when I first started. That is in the back of my mind with every training. Then I have, once you've taken that, or for any of my students listening that already took my
Mhm.
coaching, whether one of mine or whether the last two with me and
With
Simone
Simone.
Soul,
Mhm.
because it's still my change work. It's just absent Simone's business brilliance. They can take the hypnosis training, which is Integrative Hypnosis 2.0, and that is in November.
Mhm.
And that's a deeper dive into my form of hypnosis, which is, again, pulls from many different modalities and wraps it all into a nice, adaptable. For me, if it's not adaptable to the person doing it and the person receiving it,
Yeah.
then I'm just creating another script for you to read, and that's boring. But so I want it to be shaped so that all of my students, no one can help someone like each individual student, because they bring their own voice, they bring their own filter, they bring their history, they bring their artistry. So
Yeah.
even though we're all learning the same techniques, there's room to play, and the delivery of that is where the art is, the
Mm.
artistry. So coaching the unconscious mind is one class, and then integrative hypnosis is the next. That's what I have coming up. Depending on when this comes out, I have a free class on August 22nd of just demos, right? Because that's what I did in Vegas where everyone loved it. I just show the work. On Instagram, if anyone wants to follow me there, I publish a lot of transcripts of demos so that you can track the pattern. And
It-
that's what I'm doing on the 22nd.
and so we'll have it out before then. I mean, we're nearly there, but I'll make sure that it's out before then so that people
Cool. Excellent.
can jump onto that. What you offer, even in an Instagram post, your transcripts, you just give it all. Like the generosity of everything that you bring and the authenticity of everything that you bring is so like wildly refreshing in this space. Right? It's
You
so
know what?
because everybody kind of holds
I'm fairly new to Instagram. So,
right.
so
It's like you're naked out there. I love
I
it.
just didn't know what the space was for, except to be honest, I was forced onto Instagram by Simone
Yeah.
because I have built my business slowly, never really marketing or advertising. And Simone just, she really, I'm a good student when I want to be. And basically she was like, you you have to start thinking of marketing and business as this very negative thing that you never do, and instead know that marketing is simply, and this is what changed everything for me. She said marketing is simply helping people before they've paid you, and
Mm,
you've been doing that for 25 years, right? Because for me, I want this work to be accessible, and not everybody can afford to take different trainings. Certainly, the training I did with Simone, which was a 3-month massive
mhm,
undertaking, and the people that, there was hundreds of people that, left glowing testimonials that it was definitely worth, but it was a big price tag, certainly for me
mhm,
and for a lot of people. So we decided not to do that this year because a lot of people were suffering financially, and it
mhm,
just didn't feel like the congruent communitarian thing to do
mhm.
was to do another $8,000 training. And so I was like, well, how do I, what how do we do this in a way
Mm,
that makes sense, that makes it more accessible, but that still honors the people that did take the training? That 450 people took a few of the, we did
mhm.
it twice. So, so this was what we came up with. Simone has her home and she's got a bunch of great, I mean, talk about amazing stuff for free. Her starter pack is brilliant.
Mm,
I had said she did a copywriting course, and watching her promoting that course was a
yeah.
copywriting course in and of itself. You didn't have to pay her anything to learn.
It was insane how much she offered.
Right. So, for me, I do a lot of free trainings because, there's payment doesn't always mean money,
Mm, mhm,
and energy and enthusiasm. And I was just saying this in an Instagram live with Simone, because we got together. We were in Croatia when, was it Croatia? Yes. When the Maui fires were happening, and one of
mhm,
our dear friends lives there in Lahaina. So we decided to do a fundraiser. And we said, for $5, you'll get this class. Just donate at least $5.
yeah.
And we had 3 days to promote it. And we just had fun saying, come on, people, let's do this thing. And it was emotional first aid. And $5 gets you the class. We raised $100,000 for
Wild.
Maui. And when we say that, I said to Simone that everyone looks at this and says, wow, how generous of you, how, like, but truthfully, what I'm discovering is it's selfish, because it feels so good to be able to do that, that it's a dopamine hit.
Yeah.
It's very self-serving, right? So
But
when I
isn't
share,
everything?
I mean, it is, but people think of it differently. They think that it's, doing something for someone else.
Mm.
Why? Because people ask me, why do you do all these free classes?
Because it feels good.
It feels good to do it.
Mm,
And it really is. So on some level, it is kind of selfish in that I do this because it feels good to watch the ripples,
mm.
you know? to watch people that, just from taking one of my free classes went, and because I'm thinking of an actual person who emailed me, went and helped this kid, who then went and shared some of the techniques with their a friend group.
Mhm.
And so there's like 15 9-year-olds out there that are dealing with their test anxiety and all this other stuff on their own and changing their own brain because somebody took a free class of mine. And
Mhm.
that feels really good.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
know, so some
Yeah.
people, this kind of work is selfish. And when I say that, there's lots of other ways to be rich.
Mm.
Money
Mhm.
is just one way. Money to me is just what it can do for you.
Mhm.
And I'm one of those people that spends money. I like spending money. I like giving it away. It feels, again, it feels really good. It's my
Mm.
favorite thing to do. And I never knew, I mean, I always knew that, but it's only been in the last few years that I had like an abundance to actually give,
Mm.
like on
Mm.
Christmas being able to give everyone I love a check for $10,000. That was the
Amazing.
best Christmas ever
Yeah.
for me.
Yes, yes, for you. But don't you think this is like something that I'm digging into at the moment? That's the whole goal. The whole goal is for us to pursue feeling good, right?
That's
And the
it. And
better
there's
I
so many.
feel, the
That's
better
it.
the whole thing is for everyone.
That's it. And
But we
it
call it
really is.
selfish. But really, you know?
When I say selfish, I'm not meaning like it doesn't necessarily
Yeah.
have such negative connotations. I
But
know it
people
does
hold
a
that
lot.
in a different
I
way. Yeah.
know they hold it. I know they hold it. And that's why I keep using it in this way, because
Mhm.
I want to break that down a little
Mm.
bit.
Mm.
Because for me, it is important to be in a good space,
Mm.
right? When I was in the very thick of what I was going through, I did cancel classes. I did cancel a bunch of stuff
Yeah.
because I wasn't in a good place
Yeah.
for to help anybody. So it you have to be selfish in order to help people,
Mm. Yeah.
because at that point I knew myself enough. I was falling apart you know. I don't know if you were in that free class of how to be okay when your world is not. The class I did on grief. It's available on my site. It's part of the free suite of classes that I have, but up until 10 minutes before that class, I didn't know I would be able to do it.
Right. I saw that like the few days before you were saying, no, I
I
have
almost canceled the class.
seen the class. That's what I
Yeah,
have seen
and
it.
I was
Yes.
just like, "All right, people, we're just gonna be human together."
Yeah. Let's
So,
see what
I don't know
happens
what's
here.
gonna happen. I'm gonna share what's been helping me,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'll be with you here, and we'll see how we can work it out. And I
And
think it was.
that without sharing anything else. Like if you did nothing else, just showing up in your humanity
Yeah.
is what we need, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of
It's
people,
permission.
a lot of people in the kind of Instagram space, as you said, um, in more so in the coaching world, I feel, which was kind of new to me because, again, I didn't really go on social media. I didn't really follow all of this stuff. I had no
Mhm.
idea what other people were doing. I feel like they show a very polished self
Fantastic plastic.
to the world, and I don't it doesn't make sense to me, because what you're selling is, is come learn how to help people. But that projection would make anyone pause for a moment, like, damn, that woman's got her shit together. I could never do that. I mean, my God, look at that kitchen. Does anyone cook in that kitchen? It's kind of like, what? And to me, it just always it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel human.
Mm.
And at this point, AI can do that better than you.
Mm.
And right now, that is what we're up against.
Yeah.
Up against, if it can be automated, systematized, graphed, if it can be perfected, you know what I mean? Like AI can do that. What AI tends not to do well is humaning.
Yeah.
Is being your, just
Your
human,
messy self.
your messy self. And so I share it. I call bullshit on myself all the time because I feel like there's a lesson there
Well,
because
always. But yeah,
yeah,
so many of us have slopped around and
yeah,
drunk in the perfectionism of the space, the what you're
and
supposed to be, and it's just like
it's the same as the beauty standards, but don't get me started down that rabbit hole. We we are being primed every single moment because most of this goes directly into our unconscious mind. We on many levels are defenseless when it comes to the constant barrage of psychological priming that's happening every moment. And so for me, it's really, you can't escape it. The best thing you can first know is to know it, is to understand
see it.
unconscious
Yeah.
bias, to understand psychological priming, which I go over my training because I think it's important to understand, because that is your only weapon against it, is to acknowledge it, understand it, notice how it's getting in, notice when you're doing it to yourself,
Right.
and call yourself on it and be like, whoa, look what I just did. So, to me, understanding it is the first part, and then understanding how we can do better as humans. We can understand that we have these natural tendencies towards tribalism. We have these natural tendencies towards us and themism, the natural tendencies to search for certainty in an uncertain world. And we can understand those tendencies, and then we can do something about them.
It's the tricky part is people shame themselves for, you know, any of that stuff
Yeah,
without
yeah,
the
because
awareness that you can sit in just being curious. Just let it, it's not bad or good, any of it. Just have a look.
well, and back to the false narratives out
Mm.
there, the picture perfect. What did you call it? Fantastic plastic?
Yeah.
No, is that
Yes,
what you
I did.
because that by contrast makes everyone feel less than.
Yep.
That before I can earn that kind of living, before I can show up and say I help people, I've got to look like that.
Mm.
I've got to have all that going on,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
I feel like it is eroding people's ability to just show up as they are. It's so funny because I have really pruned my Instagram feed to who I follow. It's mostly comedians.
Mhm.
It's dog rescuers. It's animal rescue. It's funny babies. It's like all these
Yep.
things, and then the people that I follow are the ones that show up as humans.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
and and those are the ones that I will listen to
Mm.
and feel, and I so it makes me happy because before, just to see when I first joined, to see what people were doing in this field, I was like, what is that? What is that? I don't understand. And then I would investigate and I'd be like, oh, they're doing a free thing. Let me check out their thing. And it was
But
just
there's
one.
nothing in the free thing.
Oh my God.
Nothing.
It
It's
was
just a
one
painful
big
sales pitch.
sales pitch. And I'm like, oh, we've spent 25 minutes of you telling me how great you are. That is 25 minutes of my time.
They're
And you have
trained that way. They're
it's
trained that way. It's a part of the pitch. You got to earn the right.
so,
There's so much
and but
bullshit.
what it also does is it makes people naturally skeptical of free classes, and
Any
I
free
have a lot of free classes. So it's like people are like, "What's your angle? What are you going to sell
not
me?"
selling you. I'm not.
But on some level, of course, I am
Yeah, of
because
course.
I have a business, and what I'm selling you is me.
Mm.
Right? I'm
Mhm.
hoping that you're gonna see this class, and someday, if it's right for you,
Yep.
maybe you'll take one of my trainings, or maybe you're interested in a book or whatever. But it's never a hard sell, because I can't stand those when they're done to me. So I know the last couple of trainings, my daughter's like, you could have at least mentioned your training once. I'm like, well, if they're interested, they're gonna look me up. If they're interested, they're gonna know.
That is so true, because there's like,
I,
you
I had all
offer
those
so
other
much, people just search you out.
So
So
that's the way it goes. That's the way it goes. I would rather them take the step of searching me out than sit there feeling like it's one big sales pitch. And I'm not saying you can't mention your thing. You can mention it many times, as long as you're also balancing it out with good stuff for people, with stuff they can take away and stuff that's going to change them. So I'm not against that. I've just spent so many years not doing it that it's just not in my nature. But I'm learning. I'm always learning.
we're going to put all of your links in the show notes, and so people can join your course and your free course and follow you on Instagram and get all of your juice that you
There you
just
go.
throw
There you
out
go.
there. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So we're
So
good,
exciting.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's going to be a long one. I have a tendency to think people typically don't watch such long or listen to long podcasts, but maybe I'm wrong. Or, what
It's
is it?
fine.
15 minutes?
We're engaging. Like, people want to
We
listen,
are.
right? Thank you so, so much for joining us, Melissa. And to anybody listening, jump on that free training that's coming up if you're listening to this before the 22nd of August, or there'll probably be another one of some kind anyway. She's rather prolific in her sharing. And if you want to do her training, her full training, I just can't recommend it enough. If you've enjoyed this episode, I would love you to just take a moment and leave a quick review. If you didn't, it's okay, you don't need to worry. If you'd like to connect more, come follow me if you don't already on Instagram @freethyself.co.